Hello family and welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to cut and sew a beautiful milkmaid dress with puff sleeves from choosing the right fabric to finishing part. Make sure you watch the entire video so that you don't miss any important step. And kindly consider subscribing if you haven't done so. Also leave a comment below. Here is the fabric you'll need to get started, and for this project about 2 yards of fabric is good starting point for making a size small or medium. Now for the fun part, we'll be using drafting paper to design the front part of the dress, which is on fold into 2. We also have all required horizontal lines drawn from shoulder line down to full length line. Center front is represented by the folded edge and of course a basic dart right here. The first step of creating this dress involves drafting basic neckline, which is 3 inches wide and 3 inches deep. Once that is marked, smooth out neckline using a curved ruler just like what you are seeing. And just like always, it's time to mark half shoulder measurement on shoulder line. Mine is 6.5 plus 0.5 inches, that's 7 inches in total. From there, go down by 1 inch for shoulder slope and mark so that you are able to draw a nice shoulder slope right from neck width to the mark. It doesn't stop there, since we also need to find chest line, which I'm sure most of you know how to calculate by now. If you don't already know it, just watch any of my previous videos to catch up. Having drawn chest line, now we can easily transfer half shoulder measurement to it, and this is basically just an easier way to come up with straight armhole depth joined to chest line. Alright, let's find armhole depth midpoint and mark as well. Go in with 0.5 inches from that exact point. Last but not least, mark quarter bar circumference on chest line strictly from the center front, just so you can come up with nicely drawn armhole curve as you are about to see. Just like that, your part is done, and I want you all to bear in mind that I won't be stitching darts on this front part. Very first, take quarter waist circumference on waistline from center front still and mark. With no dart replacement needed, I'll go ahead and add 1.25 inches stitching allowance. Clearly we have quarter bar circumference marked on chest line already, so I'll only add some stitching allowance, and that being so, use a ruler to draw border side outline as shown above. Okay, let's now mark quarter hip circumference on hip line plus 1.25 inches more stitching allowance. On the same note, measure quarter round bottom circumference plus 1.25 inches stitching allowance as well. And that leads us to finishing up skirt side edge from waistline all the way to full length line, using a hip curve ruler as an extra support. If you don't own one, go ahead and draw this freehand. In this next step, we'll get hands-on and draft Milkmaid Bustier. First, move 0.5 inches downwards from bust line, then a tiny line is to be drawn across like that. You can decide to use more inches depending on how much you're willing to expose. With that drawn, measure further 0.5 inches on it from center front, just so you can design lower side of your milkmaid as you're about to see. I told you this is where your creativity comes in, so be sure to follow along. Here is how to go about the second section. Move upwards by 1.5 inches from under bust line. When done, go ahead and draw the second lower side from the mark down to under bust as can be seen. Let's now focus on the top edge. You need to measure about 1.5 inches upwards from chest line, and measure that twice in order to achieve a straight top edge with the help of a straight ruler. In case you have any concern up to this point, leave a comment below and I'll be happy to help. One last thing is to at least join the junction to the top edge, which is to be slashed out completely. Stay focused as I cut out milkmaid part from the rest of the dress. And if you're enjoying this tutorial and you'd love to see more dresses like this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a video. With front part drafted, let's now draft back part on this pattern paper. We have zipper allowance including all required horizontal lines drawn. First step being drafting neckline of 3 inches neck width measured from center line. I hope you are all seeing that, by 1 inch neck depth. That being so, smooth out neckline in that manner. Next up, mark half shoulder measurement on shoulder line. This is basically all we did when drafting front part, so in case you feel that I'm a bit fast, just know it's a repetition of what we did earlier. And guys, I've noticed some feedback that my tutorials might be a bit fast paced. I apologize if that has made you hard to follow along. I always want to make sure you are all getting the most out of them. Moving forward, also mark quarter bar circumference on chest line just so you can come up with a tiny armhole curve as shown. You might notice the back armhole has a less dramatic curve than the front. This is perfectly normal for proper garment fit. We just finished yoke part drafting, time to move on to that intake. Here I'm measuring half bust span on waistline, then on bust line 2 for easy dart line drawing, which you have to ensure runs beyond waistline. On top of that, measure 1 inch dart width, then reduce dart depth by 1 inch on the upper side from bust line. I'll take lower dart depth to be 5 inches, so that's all I'll use to create a basic dart. Now we'll be focusing on taking quarter waist circumference on waistline, plus 1 inch dart replacement, plus 1.25 inches more stitching allowance. On the same note, I'll add 1.25 inches stitching allowance to chest line. Further on, measure quarter hip circumference on waistline plus same allowance. Same goes for round bottom part. After that, finish up side outline in that manner. Back part drafting is quite simple, since after the side outline, all you need is moving upwards from chest line by 1.5 inches from where you are required to draw top edge. I'll just use a pencil because it's not the final line. You also need to move half an inch downwards from drawn line at the center front, hence new top edge drawn as I'm showing you. Having completed that, cut out a long outline. Here is a key technique of reducing zip bulge. Measure 0.5 inches inwards on seam allowance as well as on center line, just so you can draw center line and seam allowance as shown. After that is done, go in with a scissor and cut out new center line edge from top all the way to bottom. We just finished front and back part drafting. Okay, let me show you how to slash and spread Milkmaid Bustier piece. Measure about 1.5 inches apart thrice. Though for a wider bust circumference, incorporating 4 to 5 lines is allowed. It's crucial to number all the panels just before you start slashing. I now want to go straight into slashing, which is why I'll put one of the pieces aside so that I can slash through each panel of the remaining piece to the last one. Let's do the spreading. Drawn line is our point of reference. I'll be spreading each panel on it as I ensure bust line is aligned to the reference line. After pinning down the first piece, measure about 1 inch before pinning the second piece. That's what spreading means. This trend is to continue until the last piece is pinned. Once that is achieved, go ahead and shape it following the edges. Here is the back and front pieces of fabric cut from drafted pattern with enough stitching allowance left on each edge. Bear in mind the front part is also on fold. Milkmaid part 2 with fabric and linings cut from drafted pattern paper. All around it is 0.5 inches stitching allowance. Let's now take out all pins as we are about to start stitching. And basically this is how to go about stitching. Put right sides together, and after achieving an alignment, follow along my illustrations. I'm going to be drawing lines from where you'll be required to stitch, and of course don't worry because I'll show you practically how this is all done. It's equally important to note that a tiny opening will be left at this exact mark, so be keen enough not to close it down as you do the stitching along drawn lines. I'm currently sewing half an inch seam along the top edge like I mentioned earlier. Next I'll just finish the look with top stitching on the lining side following seam line closely so as to prevent the lining from showing on fabric's right side. Also miss stitching front center line 1 inch away from the top edge, and I'll backstitch before proceeding with the same to bottom edge. Stitching complete. Let's turn the fabric right side out. You'll notice an opening we left there intentionally. Stay tuned to see how we'll use it. To begin, have drawn 2 parallel lines on each piece. These lines will serve as our stitching guides. Additionally, we'll make loose stitches along bottom edges to create gathers. This is me showing you practically how stitching is done following stitching guides drawn on fabric earlier. Remember to take your time and be patient during this process because all you need is straight neat stitches. Also me making loose stitches along the bottom edge, which I'll use to create gathers later. I promised I'd reveal the purpose of the opening created earlier, and guys, this is how it works. Have inserted a rope I created from the fabric in through the opening, which I've also gathered, as well as a round bottom edge. Okay guys, with this second rope, let me guide you on how to come up with the gathered piece. A safety pin couldn't go through the opening. I resolved to using this huge needle to try and pass it through, and this was not easy. Had to be as gentle as I can because the opening was so tiny, and fortunately I managed and it was able to come out through the other end. Here, making sure gathers are uniform and evenly distributed. Had to also use the duplicate piece that wasn't slashed to ensure size of the Milkmaid piece is maintained. Same way, make gathers around bottom edge. Here is the end result after working on the Bustier piece. Before we attach them to the lower part of the dress, let's double hem this extension. Having double hemmed, put right sides together, then stitch with 0.5 inches all the way to the other end. Same instructions should apply to this other side. Have done exactly as per the instructions given, and here is what we have. Let's now focus on working on back pieces. First step being double hemming top edges as well as stitching darts. Good thing is, had marked darts, so I'll just stitch very fast and show you what we have. Here it is after stitching and ironing darts. I've gone ahead and drawn a line which will serve as my stitching guide. First, let's create an allowance for the zipper. I'll mark some inches below waistline but close to hip line. So now we'll make loose stitches along zipper allowance, a back stitch, then I'll proceed with small normal stitches to round bottom edge, leaving about 6 inches slit allowance of course. 2 back pieces are stitched from centerline guys, and I notched slightly above the slit to allow the fabric to lay flat. From this I'll bring forth the front part just so I can stitch on side using body measurements. I'm done stitching along side edges, and I now want to focus on fixing sleeves. Here are sleeve pieces. On the longer side is about 24 inches. Okay, let me now walk you through how to draft puff sleeves. First step being moving 1 inch away from side edge. Additionally, move an inch downwards from the top edge for stitching allowance. After it, align your fabric as can be seen. Then go ahead and trace armhole curves from where you'll be required to cut out. After cutting, draw new side edge diverting towards the bottom junction like that. On top of that, measure 2.5 inches upwards from the bottom edge, then also draw new bottom edge as shown. After which, go ahead and cut out, first along bottom edge and later as you will see along side edge. Having drafted sleeves, create like a loop at the top and bottom for elastic bands. Elastic bands are in place guys, and now we have complete puff sleeves. From here, put right sides facing each other as you attach sleeves to dress armholes. We'll finalize with tearing out zipper allowance so as to fix zipper. And lastly, double hem round bottom edge. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial and would love to see more dresses. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any. Once again, a huge thanks for your support. Can't wait to see you in the next video. I've got something exciting planned for it.